Ian had already gotten everything ready for David that morning, the supplies laid out neat, his bowel program done, fresh padding and lotion set close at hand. David sat comfortably propped up in bed, his feeding tube secured, the soft crinkle beneath him reminding him that Ian never missed a step in his care. Will came in quietly, watching Ian finish up. "You always take good care of him," Will said, folding his arms. Then his voice dropped, more serious. "But listen, Ian. I heard something today. Scott, David's ex-husband, and your cousin, he's getting out of jail soon." Ian froze, his hands pausing at the bedside rail. "Out? Already?" he whispered, concern heavy in his tone. Just then they stepped into David's room. The lights were low, the air calm. David wasn't sitting upright in his usual position, his bed's leg section had been lowered, his feet dangling just slightly off the mattress. He looked small there, wrapped in his blanket, his pacifier resting nearby on the pillow. "Hey, buddy," Ian said softly, masking the worry in his chest. "All set for the day?" David gave a little shrug, eyes flicking between them. He could feel the tension in the room even though neither of them had said it yet. "What's wrong?" he asked, voice quiet but firm. Will glanced at Ian, then stepped closer to the bed. "There's something you need to know, David." Will opened his mouth, ready to break the news, but David cut him off with a sharp glance. "If you guys are worried about me reacting to Scott being out," David said firmly, his voice steady despite the soft rustle of his blanket, "don't be. My lawyer already told me this morning. Scott's OP has my number, and I have hers. We shouldn't be scared. He should know by now." Ian blinked, surprised by how calm David sounded. For a moment, he just stared, realizing how far David had come since the days when even hearing Scott's name sent him into a panic. David let out a small breath, then shifted a little on the lowered bed. His cheeks flushed. "Now. Will, I need to shit. Please either help, or go. Because I'm done being scared, and I'm not gonna sit here suffering just because his shadow's back." Will's eyes softened. He stepped back, giving Ian space. Ian moved closer, squeezing David's hand before reaching for the supplies again. "You're right, Davy. We're not gonna let fear run this house. Let's get you comfortable." David leaned back against the pillows, his pacifier slipping between his lips. He closed his eyes, body relaxing, not because Scott was gone from his mind, but because he refused to give him that power anymore. Will gently slid a fresh chuck pad onto David's wheelchair seat, smoothing it down so it wouldn't bunch. "David," he said quietly as he worked, "I think we still need to talk about this. I get it, you're done with him. But I think you need a therapist, too." David frowned, his voice muffled around his pacifier. "I am one," he muttered, then gave a small, tired laugh. "But I get your point." Ian leaned against the bedrail, arms crossed but his expression soft. "He's not wrong, buddy. You've carried a lot. Even if you know in your heart you're finished with Scott, sometimes our bodies keep the fear long after the mind lets go." David looked down at his blanket, fingers fidgeting with the edge. The crinkle beneath him reminded him he was safe, cared for, right here in this room. Maybe talking more would help, he admitted quietly. Will set a steadying hand on David's shoulder. "That's all I meant. Not because you're weak, but because you're stronger than you realize, and you deserve peace." David sighed, letting Ian steady his arm as he was guided toward the wheelchair. "Okay," he said slowly, "but I still think this idea's not that good. You know what they say, doctors are the worst patients." Will gave a soft chuckle at that, adjusting the footrest so David could settle in comfortably on top of the chuck pad. "Yeah, I've heard that one. But even the best doctor still needs someone to listen to them." Ian bent down, buckling David's lap belt snug but gentle. "Besides, you're not just a patient, Davy. You're family. Therapy doesn't mean you're broken, it's just another kind of care, like what we do every day." David chewed his lip, eyes flicking between them. "Maybe. Just don't make me sit in a circle and sing Kumbaya." That got both Will and Ian laughing, the heavy air lifting just a little. David had gone to therapy like they'd pushed him to, but the session hadn't left him smiling. He'd sat stiff, arms crossed, answering questions in clipped words, and when it was over, he looked more drained than relieved. By the time Ian got him home, catheter in place for the long day, David was already half asleep in his chair, the soft padding under him crinkling each time he shifted. His pacifier bobbed gently as he sucked in his sleep, the tension in his face easing at last. Will drove, hands tight on the wheel, stealing glances at the rearview mirror. Ian. Is this really right for David? He asked quietly, careful not to wake him. Ian looked over at David, watching the rise and fall of his chest, the way his fingers curled softly against his blanket. I hope so, he said at last, voice low but steady. He deserves peace. Even if he doesn't like the process right now. Maybe it'll help him let go. Will nodded, but the question still hung in the air, heavy as the road stretched on. The car ride was quiet until Will's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's Ed. He answered quickly. Ed's voice came sharp and worried through the line. Will, Scott and May showed up at your place. Liam and I have David's overnight things here. Just bring him to us for the night. Will's knuckles tightened around the steering wheel. Fuck, he muttered under his breath. Scott and May are at our place. At the sound of his raised voice, David stirred in the back seat, pacifier slipping from his lips. What? What's going on? He mumbled groggily. Will turned halfway in his seat, forcing his tone calm. They're at our house, Davy. But listen, you and Ian are staying at Ed and Liam's tonight. They already have your nighttime supplies ready. David's eyes widened, fear flickering before Ian reached over, laying a steadying hand on his shoulder. You're safe with me, Ian said firmly. Will exhaled hard, jaw set. Ian, I'll pay you overtime, whatever it takes. Just keep my brother safe. Ian didn't even blink. You don't have to pay me for that, Will. He's family. I'll keep him safe, always. David swallowed hard, leaning into Ian's side. For the first time all day, his heart pounded not from therapy, but from the ghosts that refused to stay gone. David shifted in his chair as the car turned down Ed and Liam's street. His voice was steady now, more awake. Will. Just call the cops. They're not worth it. Will's grip on the steering wheel tightened, knuckles white. I'll do so much more than that, Davy. After everything they've done, bro, David cut in sharply, shaking his head. Don't do nothing dumb. His pacifier rested in his lap now, forgotten, his eyes locked on Will's with surprising force. They're not worth you either. Don't give them the power to drag you down. The car rolled to a stop in front of Ed and Liam's place. Ian already had the ramp ready, moving to help David out. The air was thick with tension, but David's words hung heavier than anything else. Will exhaled hard, jaw still tight. He looked at his brother, fragile in body, but unshakable in spirit, and nodded slowly. All right. I'll call the cops. But that's it. David managed a tired little smile as Ian guided him down the ramp. Good. 'Cause tonight, I just want to be safe. Not scared. David rolled through the doorway, eyes darting around Ed and Liam's place. Where? Where can I lay down? He asked softly, his voice carrying that bone-deep exhaustion. Ed stepped forward, hand on his brother's chair. We set up a room for you, Davy. Fresh sheets, everything you'll need. You don't have to worry about a thing tonight. Ian guided him down the hall, steady and calm, before helping him transfer gently onto the bed. As David settled back, Ian crouched beside him, draining his leg bag with practiced ease. David sighed, cheeks pink. His voice cracked a little. Ian. I think I messed. Ian didn't flinch. He set the tubing aside and squeezed David's hand. That's all right, buddy. You've been through a lot today. We'll get you cleaned up, and then you can rest. Ed hovered in the doorway, his chest tight at the sight, but Ian glanced back at him and shook his head with a small smile. We've got it. He just needs comfort right now. David's eyes fluttered closed, a little whimper escaping, but he relaxed as Ian laid out the wipes and a fresh diaper. Safe now, Davy, Ian murmured. You're safe. David was finally resting, his breathing slow and steady, the soft crinkle under the blankets the only reminder of the long, draining day. His pacifier had slipped back between his lips, and for the first time all evening, he looked peaceful. Out in the living room, Ed, Liam, and Will sat together, voices low. Ian lingered by the door, watching David for a moment before stepping out to join them. I don't know, Ian admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. Before I got this job, I didn't realize how much he's been carrying. But one thing's clear, he needs a holiday. Something to help him find his old self again, even just a piece of it. Will's shoulders sagged, the fight finally draining out of him. He stood and hugged Ian tight. Thank you. For everything today. We're going to be here tomorrow, and I'm sorry for how messy it all got. Ian shook his head. You don't need to be sorry. Just keep showing up for him. That's what matters. Liam looked toward the closed bedroom door, his voice quiet. He's safe here tonight. That's what counts. The room settled into silence, the three of them sitting with the weight of the day, knowing tomorrow would bring more, but tonight, David was safe. Ian was checking the driveway when he noticed a familiar car slowly pulling up the street. His stomach dropped. No, he muttered under his breath. He squinted through the windshield and saw Scott behind the wheel, May in the passenger seat. Without hesitating, Ian grabbed his phone and quickly typed a message. Will and Liam, get outside right now. Scott and May are here. He hit send and then kept his eyes glued to the car, heart pounding. The vehicle rolled closer, tires crunching over the gravel, and Ian's mind raced. David was inside, resting, and he couldn't let Scott anywhere near him. The minutes dragged. Then he saw Liam and Will rushing toward the front yard, alert and ready, their expressions a mix of anger and determination. Ian felt a slight relief, but only just. Scott and May weren't here to talk. They were here to stir chaos, and Ian knew the next moments would need every ounce of focus he could muster. Will stepped to the front door and opened it just enough to see them. Why are you here? He asked, voice calm but firm, hiding the irritation bubbling under the surface. May smirked, leaning slightly toward Scott. Tell David we're getting married, she said, voice sharp. And we want you, and him, there. Will blinked for a second, then let out a short, incredulous laugh. Seriously? He said, shaking his head. You think that's going to work? Without another word, he shut the door firmly, the sound echoing down the porch. He leaned against it for a moment, taking a deep breath. Not today. Not ever, he muttered under his breath. Inside, Ian peeked out from the side, giving Will a small nod. Good call, he whispered, keeping a hand ready to check on David if needed. Will turned back toward the living room, voice lower now but still sharp. David doesn't need this drama. He's safe here. That's all that matters. David stirred from his nap, pacifier still in his lap, and rubbed his eyes. What was that? Who was at the door? He asked softly, still groggy. Will shook his head, trying, and failing, to hide a laugh. You really want to know? He said, smirking. They are getting married, he said, each word punctuated by a quiet chuckle. And they invited us. David's eyes went wide. Please tell me you're joking. His voice cracked, a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. Will laughed outright this time, leaning against the doorframe and shaking his head. Nope, he said between chuckles. Then he straightened, gave David a reassuring smile, and shut the door firmly in their faces. David buried his face in his blanket, letting out a long sigh. Ian squeezed his shoulder gently. Don't worry about them, Davy, he murmured. They're not coming in. You're safe here. David peeked up at Ian, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Safe. Yeah, he whispered, letting himself relax a little, finally believing it. David shifted in his chair, a determined glint in his eyes. "Pass me the phone," he said, voice firm. Ian handed it over carefully. "Here, Davy. Go ahead." David dialed quickly, tapping the screen with purpose. When Pat answered, he didn't waste time. "Pat," he said, voice steady, "tell her not to go through with marrying Scott. He's just using her for money." There was a pause on the line, then Pat's voice came, calm but measured. "David. She's not a kid. I agree with you, but I don't own her. She's her own person. You can't make her decisions for her." David's jaw tightened, fingers gripping the phone. "I know," he admitted quietly, "but can't you at least make sure she sees what he really is?" Pat's tone softened. "I can guide her, but she has to decide. You can't save everyone, Davy, but you can stay safe yourself." David leaned back, letting out a slow breath, pacifier resting against his lips. Ian gave a gentle squeeze on his shoulder. "See? You're doing the right thing, protecting yourself and still trying to help." David nodded, a mix of frustration and relief on his face. "Yeah. I guess that's all I can do." David leaned back in his chair, a small, wry smile tugging at his lips despite the day's tension. "Hey. Ian, Will. Do you guys want to crash a wedding?" Will blinked at him, then shook his head, laughing despite himself. "Are you serious, Davy?" David shrugged, pacifier bobbing as he smirked. "Why not? Scott thinks he can manipulate people, May thinks she can get whatever she wants. Maybe we show up and, I don't know, shake things up a little." Ian chuckled softly, brushing back a strand of David's hair. "You're always thinking 5 steps ahead, buddy. But maybe just stay here tonight. You've had a long day, and I don't think anyone's ready for that kind of chaos." David pouted playfully, but there was a twinkle in his eyes. "Fine. But one day, we might just crash it. Just for fun." Will laughed again, shaking his head. "One day, huh? I'll hold you to that. But tonight, we keep you safe and sound. That's the priority." David settled back into the blankets, a small sigh of contentment escaping. "Safe. Okay, but I'm keeping my eye on them." Ian and Will exchanged a knowing glance, both silently agreeing, David might rest tonight, but his spirit wasn't going to be tamed anytime soon. David sat at the small table, eyes narrowing as he printed out bank records. The soft hum of the printer filled the quiet room. Will leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I thought you hated May," he said, raising an eyebrow. "I do," David replied, voice firm, "but I'm not going to get used by my ex-husband like he did to me. Pass me those documents." Will picked up the laptop and set it in front of David. "Here." "But Davy, you need to slow down. It's almost 3 in the morning." David ran a hand through his hair, frustration spilling out. "Will, why does my life have to be like this? Why is everything such a mess?" Will softened, stepping closer. "Your life isn't shit, Davy. Other people put shit on you, that's all. But you've survived it. You're stronger than you think." David slumped back in his chair, staring at the documents. The weight of exhaustion hit him, but the anger still simmered under his skin. Will put a hand on his shoulder. "It's 3 in the morning. You need to sleep. You can deal with this tomorrow." David sighed, finally letting some of the tension drain. "Yeah. Maybe you're right." Ian, nearby, quietly laid a hand over David's other shoulder. "Let's get you rested, buddy. Tomorrow, we tackle it together." David leaned back, finally letting himself relax, though the fire in his eyes still lingered. Here's a sensitive continuation of that moment, keeping the emotional care front and center. By 5 a.m., the house was quiet, shadows stretching across the room. David lay in bed, small sobs escaping him despite the exhaustion that weighed down his body. His chest rose and fell unevenly, and the blankets were bunched around him. Ian woke to the sound, rubbing his eyes and sitting up. He moved quietly across the room, careful not to startle David. Kneeling beside the bed, he wrapped his arms gently around his brother. "It's okay, Davy," Ian whispered, his voice soft and steady. "You don't have to hold it in. I'm right here." David buried his face against Ian's shoulder, letting the tears flow freely. "I'm so tired. I can't. Everything's too much," he murmured, voice muffled. Ian held him tighter, rocking him slightly. "I know, buddy. I know. It's been a long day. A long night. But you're not alone. I'm not going anywhere." David's sobs gradually slowed, the warmth of Ian's embrace grounding him. For the first time in hours, he felt a flicker of peace amid the chaos, safe enough to let himself break without shame. By 7 a.m., the first light of day filtered softly through the blinds. Will walked past the kitchen on his way to wake up and do his morning routine, only to notice Ian sitting quietly by David's bedside, watching him sleep. Will paused, concern in his eyes. "Ian. Take a day off," he said gently. "You need rest too. I'll call out for you." Ian shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks, Will. But he needs help with this. He's been through a lot. I want to be here." Will placed a hand on Ian's shoulder. "I get that, but I'll take over for today. You go rest. I'll make sure he's okay. You've been carrying too much." Ian exhaled, finally relaxing a little. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll be back tomorrow, fully rested. He'll be safe with you." Will nodded, determination in his gaze. "He will be. Don't worry about that. Go get some sleep, Ian. You've earned it." Ian stood, giving David's blanket a gentle pat before leaving the room. Will pulled up a chair, sitting beside David, ready to handle the day ahead. David stirred in bed, blinking sleepily at Will. "Thanks, bro, for last night," he murmured. I can't believe I called Pat." Will gave a small, reassuring smile. "Yeah, you did. But that was smart, Davy. Took control of the situation." David's eyes widened as he remembered something. "Oh. Ron just quit?" he said, his voice tinged with panic. "David. You're a fuck-up." Will chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I gave Ron a day off. He's coming back tomorrow." He leaned closer, voice gentler. "He stayed with you all night. Watched you sleep. He was worried about you. And so was I." David swallowed hard, a flush creeping up his cheeks. "Really?" he whispered, voice small. Will nodded, placing a hand on David's shoulder. "Really? You're not alone, Davy. None of this is on you to carry by yourself." David exhaled, finally letting some of the tension fade. "Thanks. I really appreciate that." Will smiled again, the warmth in his eyes steady and unwavering. "Anytime, little bro. Now, let's get you ready for the day." David yawned, shifting in his chair as Will began helping him get ready for the day. "Will. You have that thing at work," David said, eyes wide. "You're going to miss it." Will grinned, shaking his head. "Not a chance, Davy. I'm taking you to work with me today." David blinked, startled. "Wait. What? Really?" "Really," Will said, already starting to help him change and get cleaned up. "You're coming with me. We've got a long day ahead, and I'm not leaving you alone right now." David let out a small laugh, the tension from the early morning easing just a little. "I guess that's okay, as long as you don't make me wear work clothes." Will chuckled, ruffling David's hair gently. "Don't worry, buddy. We'll keep it comfortable. Just you, me, and a little adventure today." Ian, packing up supplies in the background, smiled softly. "Sounds like a plan. You two look out for each other, okay?" David nodded, a small grin on his face. "Yeah. Okay." Will knelt beside David's chair, reaching for the supplies with practiced ease. "All right, Davy, time to get you set up," he said softly, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. He carefully attached the catheter and secured the leg bag, making sure it rested comfortably along David's leg. "There we go," Will said, giving a small nod. "All snug and ready for the day." David shifted slightly, making sure nothing felt too tight. "Feels okay," he murmured, his voice small but relieved. Will smiled and patted his shoulder gently. "Good. You're all set. Now we can get moving without any worries." Ian, standing nearby, watched with a soft smile. "You've got this, Will. He's in good hands." David leaned back, letting out a sigh of relief. "Thanks, bro, really." Will chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from David's face. "Anytime, little men. Let's get you ready to roll." Will held a fresh diaper in his hands and looked at David with a reassuring smile. "All right, Davy. Time to get you comfortable for the day." David gave a small shrug, settling into the chair. "Okay. Let's do it." With careful, practiced movements, Will helped him into the diaper, making sure it fit snugly but comfortably. "There we go," he said, adjusting the edges. "All set for the day. You'll be comfy and safe." David gave a small nod, a hint of a grin tugging at his lips. "Thanks, bro. I guess I'm ready." Will grabbed the supplies bag and checked that the leg bag and catheter were still secure. "Perfect. Now, let's get you into the car and head to work." Ian helped Will David toward the car, giving him a quick reassuring pat. "You'll be fine. We've got your back." The low chatter in the conference room died down as the door opened. A tall man in a sharp suit strode in, setting his briefcase on the table with a loud thunk. Will straightened in his chair instantly. "Morning, sir," he said, clearing his throat. The boss's eyes swept the room before locking onto him. "You better have something good today, McGrath. It's your last day to make this pitch work." His tone was flat but heavy, carrying the weight of expectation. David shifted in his power chair, feeling the tension ripple through the room. He looked up at Will, his eyes wide. Will gave him the smallest nod, trying to mask his nerves. "I've got it covered," he said firmly, sliding a folder across the table. "Everything you asked for, plus projections for the next quarter." David whispered just loud enough for Will to hear, "You got this, bro." Will's jaw tightened, but he allowed himself a small smile before turning back to the boss. "Let me walk you through it." Will stood at the head of the table, his hands resting on the stack of folders. He took a breath and looked around the room before glancing back at his brother. "All of you know," he began, his voice steady but carrying weight, "that I have a brother who lives with a disability. He's here with us today, David McGrath." David shifted in his power chair as every eye turned toward him. He gave a small, polite nod, unsure what to do with so much sudden attention. Will continued, "I kept postponing this pitch because, truthfully, my brother's been going through some things. And I wasn't going to stand up here and pretend work was more important than him. But he's here today, stronger, and free. And I want him to see what we've been building." The room stayed quiet for a beat, the boss leaning back with an unreadable expression. Will picked up the remote and clicked the TV screen alive, the title slide glowing brightly. "So let's get into it." David smiled faintly, whispering under his breath, "That's my brother." Will paused mid-slide, setting the remote down. His voice dropped lower, more personal. "Look," he said, "every morning it's me, or David's aide, helping him get dressed, helping him with the basics. And I want you all to hear that, because it's real life. It's not numbers on a page. It's not just strategy." The room stayed still. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Will looked straight at his brother. "David, get up here with me." David blinked, startled. "Will? No, come on," Will said, firm but gentle. "They need to see you. Not just hear about you." With a sigh and a small smile, David rolled his power chair up beside his brother at the front of the room. Will put a steadying hand on his shoulder. This is my brother. Every challenge he faces, every morning, every night, reminds me why I don't give up on anything. And that's the energy I'm bringing to this project. David looked out at the room, his voice quiet but clear. He's not exaggerating. If Will can get me through my worst days, trust me, he can get this job done. A ripple of surprise went through the conference room. Even the boss leaned forward, suddenly paying closer attention. David cleared his throat, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Sometimes, he said softly, it takes me 2 hours just to get ready for the day. Some mornings, I can't even lift my arms high enough to put on a shirt. That's when I need Will or my aide. And believe me, it's not easy to admit you need that kind of help. He took a breath, steadying himself. But I'll tell you this, my brother never complains. Not once. He doesn't treat me like a burden. He treats me like family. And if he puts that same loyalty and persistence into his work, well, you'd be lucky to have him on your side. The room went quiet, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Will squeezed his shoulder, his eyes wet but proud. The boss finally leaned forward, breaking the silence. All right, Mr. McGraffey, he said, looking at Will. You've got my attention. Show us what you've got. David looked around the room, his voice steady but insistent. Everyone, close your eyes for a second. Imagine breaking your arm or your leg. You can't dress yourself, can't button a shirt, can't pull on pants. Now imagine needing help with that every single day, not for 5 months, but for life. That's my reality. A few people in the room actually closed their eyes, and the silence deepened. David went on. But here's the thing, Will never makes me feel less. He knows it takes me 30 minutes to get dressed, but if he were in my place, he'd be ready in 2. Will chuckled gently, shaking his head. Yeah. Under 2. He leaned closer, squeezing David's shoulder. Take it back, little brother. David nodded, glancing up at him. All right, your stage again. Just remember what I said. The audience opened their eyes, many of them looking at Will differently now, not just as an employee, but as someone proven through love, loyalty, and patience. Will took a breath, letting his brother's words settle in the room. That's the reason my brother is here today, he said firmly. Not so you feel sorry for him, but so you understand. A person with a disability lives day to day, challenge to challenge, and yet they push forward. They adapt. They endure. He glanced at David, who gave a small nod. My brother taught me patience, resilience, and perspective. Those are the same qualities I bring into my work. When I face a problem here, I don't see an excuse, I see a solution waiting to be found. That's not something you learn from a textbook. That's something you live. The room was silent again, but this time it wasn't awkward, it was respect. The boss finally spoke, breaking the heavy silence. Mike Graff. And young Mike Graff, he said, looking between Will and David. I need you both working with us. David, if you've got another job, quit it. Starting now, you belong here. The way you spoke today, the way you opened eyes, that's worth 3 times what anyone else could bring. David blinked, caught off guard, but Will was already grinning. Boss, I'm happy to work with him. I always wanted us side by side. Will turned to his brother, voice soft but sure. So, what do you say, little brother? David swallowed, then smiled faintly. I say yes. The room broke into light applause, and for the first time in a long time, David felt like he wasn't just surviving, he was being seen. That night, the house was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. Will carefully helped David onto the bed, sliding a fresh diaper under him and taping it snugly. David let out a soft sigh, his voice tired but warm. Thank you, Will. For today. I wish you gave me a heads up, he said, eyes glistening a little, but I needed that. Will smiled, brushing his brother's shoulder. I know you did. Sometimes if I tell you, you'll fight me on it. But once you're in the moment, you shine brighter than you think. David chuckled, shaking his head. You're sneaky, you know that? Maybe, Will said, tucking a blanket around him, but I'll always push you in the right direction, even if you hate me for it in the moment. David's eyes grew heavy, comforted not just by the clean change but by his brother's steady presence. Good night, Will. Love you. Love you too, bro. Sleep easy, you've earned it. Ian had just finished his coffee when his phone buzzed. Will, hop in the van. David's working with me today. Plus, you're getting a raise. Ian blinked, rereading it twice before grinning. He quickly grabbed his bag and headed out. When he climbed into the van, David was already in his chair, looking a little more awake and confident than usual. You're looking sharp today, Ian said with a smirk. David rolled his eyes, though a smile tugged at his lips. Don't start. Will already gave me the motivational speech of the year yesterday. Will glanced at them both in the rearview mirror. And it worked, didn't it? Now let's go show the world what this team can do. Ian chuckled, settling in. So, a raise, huh? Guess I can't complain about being kidnapped to work with you guys. David laughed for real this time, the sound lighter than it had been in weeks. Then buckle up, Ian, we've got a long day ahead. The day went on, filled with meetings, presentations, and small victories. David worked closely with Will, watching how he handled challenges, and even offering insights in his own way. Ian supported them both, keeping everything running smoothly and quietly. By evening, as they drove home in the van, David leaned back in his chair, a small but genuine smile on his face. The exhaustion was still there, but it felt lighter somehow. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about what had gone wrong or who had hurt him. He wasn't replaying the past. He was looking forward. And that made all the difference.